By next July, California's minimum wage will rise from the current $8 an hour to $9. Then it'll jump again to $10 an hour by January 2016. Some believe the increase will have a big impact throughout the state because California reports having the largest number of working poor in the country. Here to talk about the impact in San Diego are Claire Crawford with the Center on Policy Initiatives and SDSU economics professor Joe Sabia. Welcome.
Thank you.
I know not everyone's really happy about raising the minimum wage, and I wanted to share this with you. Assemblymember Brian Jones from Santee opposes the increase, saying it'll backfire on the working poor and, quote, this act will not just hurt business, it will drive up payroll costs so those who do business or those businesses hire fewer people, or even worse, cut the hours of hardworking Californians trying to raise their families. So I want to get your response from that. And Joe, I'll start with you first. Do you think it's really going to make it harder and people are going to lose some jobs?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the vast majority of California's working poor actually will not be affected by this policy change. Only 14% of Californians who earn between $8 and $10 an hour are actually poor, so most won't even be affected. Among the small share that are affected, some will actually be hurt by this increase as a result of their employers laying them off or cutting their hours. So the hope that we help lift the working poor out of poverty will be negatively impacted by the fact that some of these folks are going to lose their jobs and be dropped further into poverty.
Has that traditionally happened in the past? I mean, it seems like you're still going to need workers regardless of whether you pay them $8 or $10. Are you talking about slashing their hours?
Yeah, they could slash their hours, or they can cut jobs. That has, in fact, happened with many state and federal minimum wage increases. And, in fact, we've seen grocery stores begin substituting toward, for example, from checkout clerks to the automated sort of self-checkout lanes. So that's another way that firms can respond to minimum wage hikes.
And, Claire, what do you think?
Well, there's been overwhelming research on this very question, and a recent study looked at over 20 years of studies around the minimum wage and its impact on employment. And it found that there really wasn't an impact on overall employment levels. It actually doesn't eliminate jobs. What it does do, though, is if you ask any low-wage worker in San Diego what it's going to mean to them to have $2 an hour extra in their pockets, they're going to tell you that that's going to have a huge increase. Wages since the recession have really not kept up at all with costs. And what we've seen in the recession and in the recovery is that the jobs that were lost were, by and large, middle-income jobs. And the jobs that have been added since the economy's been recovering have been really low-wage jobs and overwhelmingly low-wage jobs. Mm-hmm. So, if you look at the...
Go ahead.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, your center did a report on poverty in San Diego County, and I just wanted to drill down a little bit on that and ask you, who is working for minimum wage? Are these teenagers, people trying to support their families?
So the data that we've seen about who would be impacted by California's increase in the minimum wage says that over 90% of the people impacted are people over the age of 20. One interesting statistic that is really sad, frankly, is that the number of workers that are impacted that are between the ages of 16 and 19 is around 5.3%. That's the same number as the number of employees that are over 60 years old. So there's a lot of senior citizens, there's a lot of adult workers. And from our own experience, just talking to workers in San Diego, we see plenty of single parents struggling with minimum wage and low wage jobs, that this is going to be a huge benefit for them.
What types of jobs are typically minimum wage jobs?
So certainly hotel industry jobs are low wage. In the retail is a big one. Food services, food preparation, those are all the fast food workers. I think the things that people would expect to see.
Okay. California's unemployment rate last month was at 8.9%, slightly up from the month before. What about the argument that maintaining a low minimum wage actually helps the economy because it creates more jobs, as you were alluding to earlier?
Yeah, I would argue, so I've been very much in the middle of the empirical research to which Claire referred about the impacts of minimum wages on employment and poverty, and would suggest that the evidence is pretty clear that higher minimum wages do not alleviate poverty or provide an engine for economic growth. In fact, there's some evidence in research that I've done that increases in state minimum wages actually decrease gross domestic product at the state level that's generated by lower skilled industries, in part because of higher labor costs and because of laying off workers. So we have to get a handle. If the objective is to help lift the working poor out of poverty, we have to think of public policies that are actually going to be effective at achieving that end. And I would argue that raising the minimum wage isn't. Most minimum wage workers live in households with incomes 2 or 3 times the poverty line. They are second or third earners in non-poor households. You're not targeting the right people, given the objective.
Okay, and Claire, let's end on this. As far as the $2 an hour, you mentioned $2 an hour extra for these people who are making this wage really does have an impact. What kind of impact are they telling you?
It has a huge impact. Just looking at some of the numbers, average rents in San Diego are over $1,400 a month. Right now, if you're making minimum wage, you can't even afford to pay that monthly rent. Your income is lower, and that's just housing costs. So being able to afford rent, being able to afford to get to and from work, and if you're one of the young people that Professor Sabia and others think are the only people making minimum wage, which I think is clearly not true. If you walk down any street in San Diego, you'll see that college costs are astronomically high, and those very same young people actually do need a higher wage to be able to afford to get to and from school.
But if you lose your job, you won't have more income.
There's that too. Now, there's a whole lot more, obviously, to discuss about that. It's on our website, kpbs.org. We are out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.